put it on here and I can send that link out after. So, I write these questions to help us better understand like where you're coming from and then where you're hoping to head. Because as you might know, when I reached out to Agatha, it was pretty broad because our friends at Northland Foundation said, hey, I think that you guys should get connected. Just based on some of the work we've been doing and some of the rumblings of things that Grand Portage might be trying to accomplish and kind of create going forward, and that Northspan and the Northland Foundation SBDC could be helpful. So these questions might seem really big, but you both have a lot of experience in the community, so probably not as big as they seem. The first one is just, if you could give us some ideas of what major events or accomplishments the tribal council or a community has had in kind of the last 10 to 20 years. And, framing it, I guess, in that business or economic development realm, but community development to me is how that all starts too. So they are all really intertwined. So just kind of major events or accomplishments in the last 10 to 20 years.
Not to I guess take the train of thought away, but I just wanted to kind of continue the conversation we had in the fall, right? We at the Northland Foundation were up to visit with you and the rest of the tribal council, and we talked a little bit about like the border being closed and how that had affected tourists coming through to the casino, and we talked a little bit about entrepreneurialism in terms of, were there outlets that you might be able to take advantage of in Grand Marais and other places. I think we talked about workforce and the need for training and getting folks. So I just wanted to make that connection because I'm not sure that we did here, and so. Sorry for interrupting, but I just wanted to say, this is kind of a continuation of that conversation, right?
Right, which is why Tony then reached out.
Exactly.
So to go back then, just, in your minds, in your opinions, what are some of those major accomplishments or events that have been happening? It might be positive or negative.
So, Alyssa, if I could just kind of frame this, how are you hoping to, by gauging these questions, how are you hoping to help us with strategic planning or business development by going through these points? Like, I just want to kind of, in my mind, I want to kind of understand our working relationship and then figure out where is our best effort put forward. And so I don't want to interrupt your facilitation. You're doing an excellent job, but I just want to, for me, I have to understand it, and I'm a visual learner. So I have to hear it and see it. And then I'm like, okay, I understand where we're going.
Absolutely. So big picture, just trying to assess, we haven't had to had a conversation yet at all. So just trying to really understand, where do you want to be heading based on what the past has been, right? So just trying to ground ourselves in some of that history that helps us figure out then what is the priority moving forward, and where is there a good fit? If it is, we need to start with here comes Robert. If it is to start with, strategic plan for economic development, or is it, are there different components that are, right now immediate needs? So really to try to ground us and then base us in where could we be working together? What would make the most sense? Does that help?
Yeah, it does help, because I think sometimes trying to describe the last 20 or 10 years is hard to know what's relevant to you, and then also what's relevant in our steps forward. So that explanation does help. So if we think 20 years, that'd be 2002, and I was still in high school. But I think that there's been a lot of change. Just even thinking back to like in the early 90s, the community center was built. And from there, it expanded in having a K-6 program that was a charter school, and kind of started off as an arm of the school district and expanded into its own charter school. So like that was a huge accomplishment that the community made. We've had a number of development projects, like roads rehabbed, roads returned to the band. I think that, mostly as far as you're talking about economic infrastructure, we have the Lodge Casino, which is a hotel casino, and we have Hollow Rock. So there's been some improvements to Hollow Rock cabins during this time period in the last 10 years. There's been a significant renovation of the hotel and casino complex. The trading post is a convenience store, fuel, and some grocery items. That's a relatively new facility within the last 20 years. I think, let's see, what else have we been doing? I think there's just a lot of infrastructure that's come up since the 2000s. And so when I think about, what are some of the major events that are happening, those are some of the things that I think of as a young person, but I'm sure there's others that our council can reflect on, whether it's like governance, intergovernmental relationships and developing MOUs, or being the first to do something. Grand Portage has a lot of firsts that we're very proud of since the 90s and 80s. So we like to work together intertribally, and have done a lot of work there as well. So yeah, I think it's hard to kind of wrap it up in a nutshell, but those are some of the things that come to my mind.
I want to welcome Chairman Deschamps here, and I know he has his video off. He might still be in somewhere else, but if he hears us when he gets a chance, please introduce your. Oh, there we go.
Yeah, I'm here. Got
Awesome.
up another one, so.
If you want to introduce yourself, and then we'll do a quick intro. We are recording this too, so that we can share it with the group that couldn't be here today.
Okay, I'm Robert Deschamps, the tribal chair for Grand Portage. I've been in office for about a year and a half now. Before I was a tribal chair, I was county commissioner up here for 3 years for District 1, and I ran the Grand Portage construction for 9 years, and a long history.
Great, thank you. Well, I'm Melissa Hanson. I'm the president and CEO here at Northspan. I'll pass it over to Bob and Michael.
Hi, Robert. Bob Palmquist at the Northspan Group, Vice President at Northspan. Been with Northspan since 1991.
Hey, Chairman, Michael Kolkloff with the Northland Foundation. We met for a short while back in the fall when I came up with Leanne, Little Wolf, Tony Surdich, and Eric Torch. Good to see you again.
So I was just asking kind of about how to ground us in the conversation, show just a little history when it comes to economic or community development, and what would have been some of those major events and accomplishments in the last decade or so. And so April shared a bunch with us, and Maria, I knew had, oh yeah, she had to take a phone call. So, if you have anything you want to share, Robert, around kind of what would have been some of the high or low points when it comes to economic and community development in the last 10 years, maybe what those are associated with.
Yeah, I guess community development wise there, of course, we have our enterprises. you know, everything kind of flows around that. You know, that's such a huge part of our economics on the reservation here. It funds pretty much 90% of everything. You know, we have a lot of needs around here that aren't being covered. You know, we have our historic log school up here that was built by the CCCs in the 30s. Most everybody here on the reservation went to school there at one time, 1st through 6th grade, and that's one of them buildings that needs a lot of repair to it. There's, I don't know, I guess I could go on and on and on with the needs of Grand Portage, and you know, we're just seem to be falling short on a lot of them.
So when you think about kind of the journey in the last decade or so, kind of what have you learned that's telling you where you want to go, and like why we're having this conversation? And you maybe had some of that conversation with Michael was up there, but you know, there's the enterprises, the community development components, but what have you learned in that? And so like, why do we want to keep moving forward towards economic development? I guess is a good way to say.
I guess it would be security for our future, you know. What's our, you know, you can talk to a lot of people there. I just asked April a couple of weeks ago, you know, what's our vision for Grand Portage? What do we want it to look like in 25, 50 years from now? You know, and that's not our decision as tribal leaders to have that vision. That's the vision of the Grand Portage band. You know, where do we want to see ourselves? And you know, with the last 2 years, it's been so difficult. We're just in survival mode now. We haven't really been able to have those conversations with the community members, and you know, it's just day by day business now, just so we can survive. So it's really hard to get everybody sit, you know, in one place here, you know, and you know, let's see what we're going to look like. You know, what do they want us to be in 25 years from now, 50 years, 100 years? You know, that's one of the difficult things with what's going on now. It's hard to, like I say, it's just hard to gather people.
Yeah, absolutely. So part of this, you know, moving forward component is really understanding what that vision might be for the community as a whole, possibly engaging with the community to better understand that through some process. Do you feel like you have programming priorities when it comes to economic development and community development, as well as, you know, pulling in the community to better engage with them to understand their vision? But do you feel like the tribal council has programming priorities and what those might be?
I don't know, what do you think, April?
Sure. Well, when you look at our resolutions, our main emphasis is on the health, safety, and welfare of our people. And it's kind of a generic statement in our resolutions, but it can mean so much when it comes down to like on the ground, actually working on providing governmental services. And when I say providing services, I don't mean just assisting people. I mean like building capacity. And so I think there's like a number of priorities that the council has laid out. For example, if you have had experience in federal Indian law or treaties, you know that the federal government hasn't provided the same level of what they should have in signing those treaties and ceding land and establishing, when we established a reserve of land on the reservation, you know, this is our homeland, but there was also things like education, healthcare that were supposed to be part of that arrangement. And so the funding sources that come through the Bureau of Indian Affairs to provide for healthcare, when I talked about serving a previous term, you know, we would utilize all those resources within 3 months. And so for the rest of the year, the tribe had to prepare and plan for providing health care services to our members and employees for the rest of those months. And now with facing the pandemic and the disruption of patronage, the disruption of business with business closures. We're just not seeing those resources being replenished. And so I use that as an example of healthcare is our economic engine of the casino and partnered with the hotel and the trading post. They fund the government's ability to provide basic healthcare that's not covered by the Bureau of Indian Affairs funding. Same thing with education. We receive a certain portion of funding from the Bureau of Indian Affairs or through self-governance, but that funding doesn't cover, all of our young people wanting to achieve higher education. So, we fund scholarships, and so everything's kind of innately tied together. So when I talk about health, welfare, and safety, it could be the fact that Grand Portage worked with the county on an agreement and we paid for a deputy's services for a number of years, because that's really a function of the county. But the community wanted to see an additional deputy. And so the tribe paid for that. And so, there's other ways in which we have a number of priorities, I think, just generally like reinvesting in infrastructure. Bobby has talked a lot about this. Our waste, water, and sewer infrastructure, reinvesting in our community housing, and like Bob mentioned, development, loans and different things like that. Well, we could also use assistance with, residential development. So I think there's just like a lot of priorities that kind of boil down to providing those basic government services. And I think maybe the one that rises to the top for me is that diversification, because we see what a pandemic and a border closure can do to a brick and mortar establishment. And if we don't have a change of course with the border restrictions and seeing more patronage, we'll be in this position for a long time. So we expect, a recovery period of a few years, but we want to be seeing our ability to be able to provide services increase, not decrease or not cut. And I think that's one of the main challenges we're facing right now.
Great, thank you. I'm just taking notes rapidly. So when you think about some of that conversation, where do you feel that a consulting group kind of based in business and community development might be able to positively impact how you're trying to move forward most directly?
Yeah, I think that's it's so hard to get the community engaged right now. I'm hoping that the community would come together and tell us which direction that, what they would like to see for economic development and stuff like that. And it's just right now, we got a grant, I think, from IRRB or from someone for diversification study. I don't think we've got one response on it yet. So.
Okay. Interesting.
And that's been over a year, and it's diversifying on the reservation is really I don't know, it's like a 90-10 split. A lot of people see our community down here in the Bay and they want everything up above us, the rest of our land left alone.
Yeah. So I just want to dive a little deeper into that community engagement component. That is something that we do a lot, and where we've had some really great success working with other tribal communities is engaging with what we call community champions or community leaders who become kind of part of our paid team. And they help us, you know, if we're setting up in-person and virtual, what I'd call listening sessions or focus groups, to really try to engage in that in-person or virtual space to listen to what they want to see or hear, you know, what they want to see in the future or what their priorities are. We generally will do that through a survey component. And then when we get into those groups, we present that and then, you know, provide more opportunity to listen. That's been really successful to build, like you were saying, kind of that vision or the priorities for strategy to engage outside of the council to really be able to hear. So I could see that being really helpful if you're at that stage right now where like there's a lot of priorities. And so how do you then rank them? And how do you get to listen to the community to bring that information back to the tribal council to then make good decisions, you know, even in the short term, if it's that 3-year time frame or 5-year time frame, to start moving towards what that ultimate vision might be for a 25-year, 50-year vision for the community. And so, I mean, when you kind of base that, and then I think I heard you right, Robert, saying that you've been trying to get like a revenue generation diversification study done or kind of been reaching out around that. Is that what you were saying?
Yeah.
Yeah. And just haven't had any luck. Have you been able to put that out in an RFP?
Not yet.
Okay.
You know, and that's one of the things too there, you know, if we do this big study and nothing changes with this border thing, it seems like there's a roadblock every time we see an opening, that door closes again there, you know, it's hard to deliver on it. You know, we can have all the plans in the world here, and if we can't deliver on them, what's the, you know, that makes it tough on our end.
Yeah, because you need to be bringing in some folks from outside of the community to create the revenue that's required to support the community. Yeah. So without bringing the community together in this our conversation today, do you feel like you have a grasp for what the community might really respond to or value the most from a kind of economic development, community development perspective? What they might want to see if you can, you were
I do like
a few shoulders.
I do like that idea of maybe mailing something out, you know, making sure they all get it and see what the responses are from people. You know, if they get it in their post office box, they can't say they didn't get it.
Yeah, it always helps you, like, so we usually pair it with then that either in-person or virtual space so they can respond to it via email or hard copy, however they want, but then to be able to come and talk about it. That's usually how you get more engagement and you get to hear from more voices, because oftentimes if people just say, well, I can send this in, but then what's happening? You see a lower response rate versus, okay, and we're going to have 3 in-person sessions where I can show up and actually talk about what I put in in answer to the survey. And we're going to prioritize that. And then that's going to be presented to the group, the tribal council. That tends to be where you see really stronger participation and all the opinions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think also we host like community meetings. So pre-pandemic, we would have community meetings, or we'd have a meal, and 35 people might come, and that was a good turnout. And so I think that as people get used to meeting in person again, that I think you're right. You get more engagement and more like able to have a conversation instead of kind of just coming to their own conclusions based on whatever flyer, pamphlet, or whatever typewritten statement you're looking at. So one of the things I wanted to ask about is, you talked about facilitation. Do you ever do like capacity building where you, for example, I think one of the main priorities that band members have is like band member employment, or if there's a new diversification, say we're gonna buy something and someone's going to run it, you know, we always want to make sure it's a band member who's able to run whatever that might be. And so I'm kind of like framing this up as like forward thinking, future oriented.
Mhm.
Do you ever build capacity amongst individuals where they could receive training or experience somewhere, and then they would run, say, whatever it is you're diversifying into? Or are you more on the pre-steps of just engagement of, you know, figuring out what the community wants?
So I would say both sides in different capacities. So on the front end, yes, for sure, like we've done a lot of that work, built, understanding what the community needs, putting that together, creating that plan that we can see get into action and not just sit on the shelf, which is my worst enemy, pet peeve in the whole world. But then on that back end, we've partnered with a lot of different organizations that do that kind of work. So the Mille Lacs Corporate Ventures, you may be familiar with what they call the Enterprise Academy. And then in Northeast Minnesota, we also have Innovate 218 that has recently launched these things called ILT Academies. And I love it because it's similar to Enterprise Academy in that fact that it is training someone's mind around, what's that community issue or problem? And like, I might have some solutions, but, do I feel like my idea is valid? Sometimes maybe do I feel like I'm valid in the community? And then how do I just contemplate how to create a solution to this problem? And that might be a product, that might be a service, that might be, something that is created from a business standpoint, but it also might be a nonprofit or something else. And so those two programs, we've connected and done a lot of work with Corporate Ventures. We have not partnered on that Programming Initiative Foundation has, which is a colleague in the state with Northland Foundation. But ILT, we've been partnering to help make that happen in Northeast Minnesota. So, it's like we find the funding to help bring those programs to the communities. They're led by other organizations. So that's oftentimes how Northland Foundation, Northspan, even other development corporations in Advanced Minnesota bring that kind of access to the community. So it's like, once we know what the community wants, let's find the groups that can provide that educational component, building that capacity. Advanced Minnesota has a lot of different programming that could be pulled in, and they support Cook County and that whole area as well. But ILT is probably the newest thing in our region that is really trying to build that capacity. When you think about trying to diversify and build capacity in your kind of like getting someone to the point where they'd go meet with a small business development consultant, right? Like a lot of people don't even feel like they can make that phone call because they're like, I don't even know if my idea is a real thing. And so that Enterprise Academy or ILT Academy really can be very cool in building capacity. And usually you get, 12 to up to maybe 30 people that are engaged in those at a time. So it builds this really cool cohort of capacity building as well. We've seen a lot of success in other communities, utilizing that type of a resource. We're looking at trying to be able to bring those ILT academies out to more of our communities in Northeast. So I could see that being a really good fit. So it's like every time they do one, they're learning how to make it even better for each community they work with as well. So both sides, it really just depends on how, we want to be able to bring those resources. And so partnering with our different organizations, we're rich with groups and organizations in our region. So it's making sure we all get connected and can provide like the best to create outcomes that the community is looking for.
So I have another question related to that. You had mentioned you worked with tribal communities and mentioned Mille Lacs. Could you give us some examples, Bob or Alyssa, how you've maybe worked, and maybe it hasn't been rural, but we're very rural up here. We have a small community of about 350 people. And so I think when we talk diversification or thinking about how we're expanding in the future, we have to kind of think about where we're located, what's our what's our audience, all those pieces. But it would be good to have some examples of maybe some of the work you've done or facilitation.
Yeah, I'll start out. Bob, I know you've got some good examples too, but so most recently we've been doing some work with Mille Lacs Band of Ojibwa, and that main partner has been Corporate Ventures. They've been building tribal economy business incubator project concept, they call it TEBI. And so we coordinated the group, about 7 different consulting organizations that pulled together the kind of full concept. So we did a ton of community engagement on the front end. We worked with community champions to have in-person and virtual conversations in all 3 of the districts to just really understand what those districts, exactly like you were talking about, what the vision is and what they want to be or see, especially framed in that tribal economy. So how it impacts the businesses and organizations that are in those 3 districts, which are different. It's different in Hinckley than it is in Onamia, and especially even compared to up further north by McGregor. So getting a real kind of sound base on what is the vision for that, and then what did they want to see out of what a tribal economy business incubator one means, and then what would it provide, like in those different areas, how could it provide services? So then we pulled that information together, actually looked at like what sites were available, what was owned by the tribal council and what wasn't, or by Corporate Ventures, to see what would be viable for physical incubator space and the different types from an agricultural perspective or retail perspective, and worked with a architecture firm that actually, then rendered out like what would the cost be to either build new or renovate that, and pulled that information together to then apply for federal dollars related to being able to put those into production and provide that programming. So we're actually waiting to hear on that right now. It's very exciting. It's making me like, we just want to know. So that's been almost a year that we've been working with the community down there. And in that time period, they've had 2 more enterprise academies graduate. And so it's been really exciting. The people that were the community champions were all part of an enterprise academy to begin with. So they became our paid kind of consulting team that helped to recruit across the different groups in those communities. And that was bringing tribal community members and then non-tribal community members together in those conversations as well. And because of their tribal economy being kind of chunked out between all these non-tribal communities, they wanted to be able to make sure that those incubators actually served more than the tribal community. So what would that look like, and how would that conversation go from an application standpoint, but then also to build those relationships in the community. So that one has been really great. We've worked with Dustin Goslin the most, and then Beth Gruber more and more, because now it's that project's been put on her plate. So she's trying to figure out how to make it keep going forward. And then in Fond du Lac community, most recently, we worked with their, what didn't exist yet, Department of Agriculture, to create a strategy committee across either, with community members, but then also staff, tribal government staff, to figure out what would a strategy look like, a 3 to 5 year strategy look like for Department of Agriculture. So we built that strategy, and then they recently hired. So we check back in with them about every 3 months just to see how things are going, where they're at, and if they need any more assistance. But I'm excited. I haven't got to connect with that new director, but it was cool to be able to do that engagement. And then as they hired, to be able to say, and here's what the community wants, like a place to start for that staff team, even though we knew it would change, it's bound to change, but it was really your ability to listen to the community and then give that to someone in this brand new department was really helpful. So those are 2 big projects. And then Bob's done a variety of different work over well too.
Well, the one I was thinking was, prior to Alyssa coming on board, our prior president, Randy Lasky, worked with the city of International Falls in a diversification project. International Falls has always been impacted pretty greatly by any changes that were taking place up at the Boise paper plant. And so they were really looking at some good, they were looking for some good, solid diversification ideas or diversification plan. And Randy worked with the city up there. They utilized some federal grant dollars through EDA, also worked through the Arrowhead Regional Development Commission to develop what became known as the Voyage Forward, which was a pretty strong, very detailed plan for diversification of the economy up in the International Falls area. And those recommendations were good real world recommendations with an action plan that the community definitely has moved forward with. I may have seen some of the results of that with some business development projects that were looking for funding afterwards, but that was more Randy's baby, and really working closely with the community, and then also bringing in some outside consultant expertise that really knew what they were doing in developing a diversification plan. So that's an example that rings, still fresh in my memory.
Yeah, similar to what we've done in from that Go Cook County perspective. Northspan worked a lot on that, and then right before COVID hit, originally, we were going through a full update process in that, and got about halfway through before we were stalled on all of our community engagement process. So we did all the update on like the data and information. And so they've been kind of running with that. And now there's been a lot of change, as you probably know, with Mary Somnus retiring and Beth starting. And so we were just up there recently before it got real cold and just kind of reconnecting with some of the folks, the kind of the typical folks that were up there. And Aga had hoped to join us that day, and I knew wasn't able to. But from a Northland Foundation perspective, not only have you guys done a ton of work in our really rural communities, but also recently with the new Marauking grant program.
Yeah, I have the honor of serving on that board, the Marauking board. And so there were a number of grant portage applications that were awarded in this last round. And so we posted it on our page so that more people will apply. But I'm just like thrilled with that initiative, because it puts it in the hands of individuals in a community where they can apply. And it's a relatively simple process to apply, and you have a board of community kind of point people in the different communities that are within the Northland geographical area. And so it just really like it feels very homegrown, grassroots, and less of a top-down approach and more of a raising up, elevating. And so maybe that's that you bring that up, maybe that's kind of, as I'm talking about this, that's kind of what we want to see, is we want to see an opportunity where the government can diversify, and that individual members or maybe a family could operate a business or a structure that could garner revenue for the tribe, or maybe it's I think there's been less of individual development business wise over the past few years. There's just not a lot of opportunity, but I think there could be. So anyway, just reflecting as I was talking about that. Sometimes you get these ideas as you're talking.
Michael, did you want to share other examples?
No, I've been on the fringes of the Marauking, and it's pretty cool to see that. And I think if there is a way for us to expand that into economic development, that's maybe where this goes. And so, at our conversation that we had in the fall, we talked about, does it make sense for the tribe to to invest in businesses that are outside of Grand Marais, right? And similar to corporate ventures, or does it make sense to have cohorts like Alyssa was suggesting in terms of, folks that are interested in business? We could have Pat Campagnaro and Beth Drost be up there meeting with folks to talk about, like, well, what does it mean to start a business? How do you go about it? And what resources are available? So there are a ton of resources. I think it's just us being that conduit of helping, because most people don't know, like, if I want to start a business, how do I go about it? There's just that there isn't that there isn't that ecosystem, right? That it's not it's not as strong as it could be. And so I just think these conversations will help us to get there.
Yeah, I think for many entrepreneurs, as a serial entrepreneur myself, like, first getting to the point where you feel your idea is valid is really important. And I think a lot of people are intimidated by that SBDC phone call because they're like, is it a business? Is it just an idea? And that's where I think some of that programming, like we were talking about, can be really powerful to build that confidence. Honestly, like, there's a big component of building confidence before you can dive into looking at a small business development business plan template. So I definitely feel like we're kind of homing in on funneling in some ideas on, where can we go next? And April or Robert, I know Murray had to step away. I hope everything's going okay. If you were to say, hey, in the next 6 months, what would you want to see, like, first steps or highest priorities? I mean, I feel like our team could definitely put together, here's a proposal of what we think we could move forward, but I'd love to hear from you what you would rank, what you would put at the top of the list.
Well, for myself, I would say if we could partition off a source of funding or find a source of funding, I would say absolutely we need to diversify independent of lodging and gaming. We need to find an opportunity to create a source of revenue that's independent of tourism, maybe, because what we're finding right now with the pandemic is it's just really restricted our ability to provide services. So to me, as the treasurer, I want to secure a stable source, and I'll just call it an economy, another type of economy where we can rely on to provide services, ranging from anything from scholarship to, utility, reinvestment in infrastructure, whatever that might be. I think there was a lot of things that were unfunded during the pandemic or not allowable under the federal dollars that were distributed. So we have a lot of unmet need here because of that restriction of the border closure, and then also the current restrictions that are happening for our patronage. And so, yeah, that would be my highest probably priority. And then kind of related to that would be building capacity in the community. So if we could raise up some individuals who are able to not only think about an idea, but they're actually able to execute it. They're actually able to be successful. And then, like, with that comes like kind of an ownership or an excitement, and maybe there could be more mentorship opportunities after that individual is kind of taking this on. So those would be my 2 things.
What do you think, Robert?
Yeah, I agree with them. One of the things that I guess I'll hit on that when you guys were up here and visited us last fall, there was, I don't want to have a business development program for band members that's setting them up to fail. You know,
Yeah.
that's one of the hardest things there. I own a business myself. I went through the SBA process. You know, and I was in the business for many years before, so I knew I could be successful at it. But I just don't want someone to, you know, if we can get them rolling in a business, and I think we need to definitely be able to support them somehow to make sure they are successful. Because I think that I feel pretty bad if, you know, we talk someone into starting their own business and then they fail at it, you know, even if they gave it their all and it still fails, it's still a pretty hard hit on someone.
Absolutely.
And then the other thing would be, we talked about earlier there, you know, sending out a community flyer or something on, you know, what they would like to see.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Is there any way we could get connected with, I know we have good working relationships with Chief Executive Melanie Benjamin, Secretary Treasurer Sheldon Boyd from Mille Lacs, but is there any way maybe your connection with Mille Lacs where we'd want to maybe talk a little more about their, you called it an academy, I
Yeah,
think?
Enterprise Academy and then the ILT Academy are kind of two things going on. Absolutely. I know we could make those connections and set up a call. Beth and Dustin for sure. And then the gentleman his name's Brian at the Initiative Foundation too, who helps to lead that academy program. It also might be fun to hear from a couple who have gone through it. So a few that have been in our panel and worked in that process. And one who has become a good friend, I would say, of mine. He now owns 3 businesses. It's crazy. It's so fun to see, all serving the community in different ways. So I know they would be up for that.
And I know there's other opportunities too, like for example, the Minnesota Chippewa tribe has small business loans or technical assistance, you know, so maybe there's a way we could partner the work together where it's almost like a development and then a handoff, you know, if it's individual focused or if it's government focused, it'd look a little differently. But you know, I think that there's some elements of like seeing what examples are out there.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's a real good idea, April. You know, see what businesses have worked and what haven't worked. And
Yeah, even Dustin has a pretty awesome presentation on, you know, their internal revenue generation and like how corporate ventures kind of became what it is, but then now how that group is trying to support, you know, non-governmental businesses and the growth of that really, and seeing that strength come from within the community instead of it coming just from the governmental structures. So yeah, cool. So I feel like I have kind of 5 main areas. It might be 4 really, but kind of that, how do we diversify? You know, what does that look like from a government perspective to be able to provide those sources, especially away from something that is, or something independent of tourism? And of those building capacity concepts, that might be governmental owned, or it might be, you know, tribal community member owned. And in that, kind of embedding in that, how do we create a program that really sets people up for success? And then community engagement around the vision, and then connecting in with other tribal communities, particularly in Mille Lacs, and what has worked and what hasn't, I think is a good question to ask, right? You want to see what worked, but also like, what did we try that did not work? Can be really powerful to know those examples. Am I missing anything, Bob and Michael? Trying to take good notes so I can send it out to the team here.
Well, that was a good summary of what I'd had written down already.
Any other questions you have for us that we could help answer, other than hold myself accountable to share this with our team and bring something back to you from a proposal perspective and or those, the connection component. Any questions you have for us?
I don't have any more questions, and I actually have to jump off and get down to another 11 o'clock now, so
Absolutely.
appreciate the call.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Have a good day.
Right, you too.
And we did record, so I'll share the recording as well.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah.
My only question, Alyssa, is just, a lot of times in capacity building, you have, okay, you have, doers, people who do, and then people who kind of dream. And so like, I would love to know like how much of it does Northspan actually do with us, And so, because I think sometimes we want to develop capacity, but we realize we're just not quite there yet to actually be doing whatever the work is. And so, if you could kind of summarize maybe some of the things that you actually, kind of come alongside and do with us, that would be helpful for me as I think about us moving forward.
Absolutely. So it's an awesome question, because depending on a community's needs, we do a lot or we do a little.
Okay.
So
Okay.
we provide, in some communities that we work in, we are providing, we are their economic development team. So we actually are the consultants for the East Range Joint Powers Board, which is a community group, the Bowabic, Coit Lakes, Aurora, Town of White. And we are their consulting team to move business and economic development forward. So we deep dive all the way down to all, managing all those community meetings and everything. We provide similar, but a little bit less deep services, which with a group in East Central Minnesota, where it's more administration to keep their economic development stuff moving, because they do have some staff capacity. And so it really depends on what that staff capacity is to keep. So, say we do community engagement, we have a strategy and a vision, in that, what can be done by staff that exists and what can't. That's a really good way to figure out, how do we partner? How do we pull in Northland Foundation and those other partners out there to keep the work moving forward? That often is then, how we build basically the plan to keep going, and who are the partners that are needed to do it, because where is staff at capacity and they really can't take on anymore. But these two priorities we want to see moving forward. So we're going to, pay the consultants to do that. We have a unique opportunity, I think, right now with Northland Foundation, who wants to support that financially. So that's kind of how I would envision that, April, to really better understand what the needs are through that strategy or vision process, so that we can provide what that would need to be to then get the tribal community to where they can take on more and have built that capacity, or, the revenue generation to be able to house those positions, working with Pat Campanero and Beth Drost in the community that can support it as well.
Thanks. Yeah, if you wouldn't mind, I'd love to see that kind of written out.
Yeah.
And it could be an email, could be like a workflow. I don't know, however you want to do it. It would just help me.
Yeah, absolutely.
That sounds great though. Thank you.
We'll put it into what I would call a more formal proposal, so that Northland also knows what we're thinking we can do as a team up in the community. So we'll make sure that we connect with kind of Michael's team as well from an SBDC standpoint, and build that out.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So nice to meet you both. Stay
Likewise.
warm.
All right.